Welcome back to another Tera Plays Tera video. Today's video we are going to be going over Warrior DPS. And yes, this is a guide. We finally hit 250 subs. I want to thank you all so much. So here's my promise on making a overall Warrior DPS guide for you. Before we get into the guide, I do really want to thank everyone so much for helping me hit 250. I have a bunch of cool ideas that I want to bring to the channel over the course of the next year. Many of things that will be coming out. I do want to say right here and right now, I do have a goal by the end of the year hitting 1,000 subs. I believe we can do it. We've been growing pretty well the last few months, and I think it's possible. So within that though, don't worry, there'll be several milestones throughout that. I'll be figuring them out. If you got any suggestions in the comment section on something you really want to see, maybe it would be a cool milestone idea for hitting 300, 400, 500 subs or whatever it is. But I know the last time when I made this original goal of 250 to do a War DPS guide on console, I started playing a bit more PC, and I kind of feel bad for PC players who sub that are like, cool, I subbed, but you're doing a console guide. So I don't want to just set milestones for only console. I'd like to think of stuff for PC as well. If you're from PC and you're like, hey man, try this, go ahead, suggest it. I'm open to anything, and we can set milestones for whatever sub count, whatever cool ideas we got. But, so yeah, for now, thank you so much for hitting 250, and let's get into the Warrior DPS guide. Alright. The first thing I want to explain about my guides, about this guide, is that I am not teaching you how to speedrun dungeons. I'm not giving you crit factor for CAA. I'm sorry. These guides are for beginner to intermediate. Because Warrior is my main, I will show off Mfba. I will show off Mfba's stupid build, but I want to show Shira. I want to show a warrior that doesn't have cracked out gear, because ideally someone new to warrior or new to this game is not going to have cracked out stigmas, nor gear, nor builds. So I'm going to say this nicely to all the cracked out warriors that are going to be, me, you gotta do it, to piss off. This is for new to intermediate players. Advanced warriors, you are welcome to add comments. You are welcome to suggest things. But what I'm saying is, don't come in here being like, well, they have to run the superior stigma. They're not going to have them. Get over it. No one new to this game is going to magically shit out a full set of yellow stigmas. I don't expect them to. You shouldn't expect them to. Now that we got that straight, I think that's a great lead into why I don't expect them to just magically clear CAA and have a build magically for CAA. So that's why I'm not going over that stuff. I will, though, however, give you formulas, or what I would consider formulas, to be successful for when you get into dungeons like Cursed Anthros Abyss, like CSHM, like Rampaging Arcanine, to understand the fundamentals of the game, so that you'll know how to adjust your build to be successful. That I will apply. But I'm not giving you exact numbers, because I've never done that in a single guide. I will suggest things, I'll suggest builds, but I won't suggest exact to the point numbers, because I'm still testing stuff, as well as everyone in the community should still be testing their own builds every time they go in case the devs change something. With that being, though, is I can say certain things of what to look for to know how you may need to modify your build. So now that we got that explained, hopefully we're all on the same page. That this is a beginner intermediate guide, mostly for new warriors, or people that want to learn more about the class and understand a lot of information about the class. Then cool, stick around. This guide will probably be very lengthy, so I will apologize now. Do expect it to be a much longer guide because I want to go over as much information as I can with this class. So, the first thing I want to go over that I'm sure everyone who's been around the game for a while, if you're new, I apologize, hold in. We're going to be covering stigmas as they are a very controversial topic, and basically, depending on your stigma build will change your rotation. So, the first thing is stigmas. They will increase your damage, increase your cooldown time, or decrease your cooldown time. I apologize. They really are a game changer on how you choose to build your class. As you can see, I'm running full souls. I know a lot of people will swear by attacks. My preference is soul stigmas for most of what I do. I'm gonna break this up nice and simple, keep this nice and short. If you plan to be a warrior main, on your main warrior, I will highly recommend, and it's a pain, but it's your main, so it's kind of worth it. You may want to consider doing a full set of souls and attacks and test shit yourself. I'm just going to be honest. What I will say is that personally, I prefer full souls because I prefer the 24-second DG, which I will show off, like I said, at the end. I prefer that build. That is my preference. I'm going to go over what I think the different, choices are. And that you can do attack stigmas. If it's an alt, the way I would suggest is because attack stigmas, for me, I always feel they are easier to roll than souls. Souls have a lot of rolls and only one is good, which is cooldown. Where attacks have the chance to give you increased power, increased damage to enrage, increased back damage. If you're doing an alt warrior, if it's not something you want to sweat leaderboards with, or something you just want to have fun with, but don't dump a ton of resource, time, or money into the game, I don't blame you for going some to all attack stigmas. I really highly advise against it. I really, really, really would, but it is your game. If you're new and you're in for the grind, go with souls. In my opinion, souls are better. Having the shortest DG cooldown you can, which is your steroid, which allows you to pump out the most damage, is personally my preference to the game. I will say though, if you can kill a boss in 24-second DG, attack stigmas are goated. Because then you only get 1 DG. You might as well kill it in that 1 DG as quick as possible. That is the only time I will argue attack stigmas beat souls. But with the current game's recent reworks and updates, no high-end dungeons are dying in 1 enraged. What I mean by that is nothing above Grotto. VS and CAA are not dying in 1 enraged. So for longer fights, I highly suggest souls. So if you're building for the long haul, build souls. If you're building for the short haul, go ahead, build attacks. But again, I highly suggest souls. I also find the 100% DG rotation just more fun, and more DG means more aerial slice and more blade frenzies, which will make sense as we go on. Within that, let's go over glyphs. I will kind of point out the glyphs I have that are just more personal preference, and I'll mention the glyphs that I feel are 100% necessary. Because Warrior does have a few glyphs that could be considered more preference, and you could kind of jumble them around wherever you prefer. So the first thing is evasive roll. You want the 40% chance to increase your attack speed, and you want to reduce its RE cost by 120. These are upgraded. If you're new, you're gonna have to go do Guardian Legion missions and do IOD BAMs to get these. Rain of Blows, this is a preference on my baby warriors because they don't have the infinite DG, and like I said, I want to show that build off to the people who are just starting. It'll be closer to what they can do. I highly suggest doing increased damage to Rain of Blows. Again, this is more of a preference. The next glyphs that are basically required is the increased attack speed from DFA. This stacks, no, not stacks. This refreshes the same bonus that your evasive roll gives, to just make that clear. It's the same bonus. They refresh each another. They don't stack. I apologize for saying they stacked. I'm stupid. I also suggest the cooldown. Again, if you have crazy stigmas, you could probably replace that, but I run it, so I don't know what else to put. Deadly Gamble, these are both 100% a must. Backstab, the edge generation as a DPS is a must. The cooldown is more of a preference, but I'd highly suggest it. Pounce. Speed casting this is me. This is just what I really like. I really crutched on Pounce for RMHM when it first came out, and I first ran it on Warrior. Pounce is just a skill that lets you move really far, really fast, especially when it has the speed cast glyph. This is something you might be able to remove. It kind of just comes down to playstyle, what you want. I suggest it, but again, this is just kind of my preference how I play Warrior. Traverse Cuts, the increased infect duration to yourself, is pretty highly suggested. It's not maybe a must, but I highly suggest it. Blade Draw, this is all 100% a must. Blade Draw is your most used skill on Warrior, and it's, yeah, do it. Scythe, these are a must. Blade Waltz, increased damage to Traverse Cuts is very much useful. And then I have increased damage to Rain of Blows. Again, as you build up your own style, you may decide to put this glyph points into something else. I suggest it because I prefer Rain of Blows from being a war DPS, or from being a war tank player more. I used Rain of Blows a lot more than other skills at times. It's again not necessarily, but I suggest it. And that's all the glyph points. You may not have all of those, so if you don't, make sure you put into what I said is basically a must. Some of them, like the Pounce one, isn't really needed, but again, depending on the dungeon, depending what mechanics are happening, you might want to really consider it. It just comes down to what your playstyle is. You may find out that you don't want the Pounce and you want to put Rain of Blows damage, and you may want more endurance. So DFA endurance, again, that's really not something you probably should do, but you know, there are glyph points that add up. I don't have all the glyph points either. You could jumble some of them around and, you know, work on your own play style. So that's glyphs. The next thing I want to cover, that I cover in a few guides, is choosing your race. I wanted to take a quick second to cover this. As you can see, I'm a Castonic. This warrior only DPSs. I do have 7 other LN warriors that DPS and tank. And the reason I want to bring this up quickly is to just get the knowledge out there for anyone who does want to play warrior. If you have any thought of you may want to tank, I would highly suggest making an LN. Again, this kind of comes down to, is it an alt or is it your main? Is it something you want to take seriously or just have fun? If you want to have fun, you can pick any race. If you want to take the class seriously, Castonics get extra crit to back damage. It's not a lot, but when it comes to mid-maxing, and like I said, I know this guide is for new players, but if you are thinking you want to min-max your warrior, if you're strictly a DPS, you might want to consider making it a Castonic. If you have any thought of tanking, well, being a Castonic does not give you crit from the front, so your passive now while tanking does become useless. It's not that Castonics can't war tank, I've done it, I just don't like the animations. But I know plenty of amazing Castonic war tanks that do wonderful. Within that, I would suggest if you do want to tank, maybe also consider looking at Ellen Warrior, as their animations are much faster. But do know when you go to DPS as an Ellen, you do not get, the extra crit to the back, so that's now a downfall. You still get faster animations, and I'm going to be honest, I truly prefer the Ellen animations over the Castonic. I do not enjoy the Castonic animations at all. So I just want to go over that quickly. Like I said, if you're just making warrior for fun, you can really do whatever race you want. But those are the passives that kind of come down to it. Alright, the next thing we're going to go over, and this is a lot of information. I do apologize. I do want to go over this, but it is crit factor along with just overall build. As you can see, I have Mystic buffs applied, so I am in Mystic setup. I'm running about 208 crit. I run a bit more when I'm with a Priest. And we'll go over what jewelry and what everything I have. Do know the crit is not for cursed AI. I'm just going to put that out there. I'm not building for that dungeon. And what I will say before we dive really into the heavy numbers, and I know this is where a lot of warriors have all their different opinions. What I will say, when you are learning warrior, the two skills to look out for is Scythe and Blade Draw. If your Scythe is not critting 100% of the time, you need to run higher crit. If your Blade Draw is not critting 75 to 80% of the time, you should really consider running more crit. So, I will give you what I run. This warrior does not really run cursed AA for speedrunning. This warrior is a farming warrior. And what that means is the reason I chose this warrior to show for this guide is because this warrior's gear is more closer to what new people and intermediate players may have. With that being said, they're not maybe running cursed AA. They're not running Velik Sank. They may be not running Bahar when it was out, or they're not running CSHM when it was out. So that's why I suggest, this is something simple that can get you through content. If you want to take Warrior seriously, you may need to reconsider and adjust your crit depending on the dungeon, on the facts that I stated earlier, being that if your Scythe is not critting 100%, your crit is wrong. If your Blade Draw is not close to 75 to 80%, you need more crit. Within that, let's go over what I have for this warrior. So as you can see, all my rings and earrings are power. I have a full power set for the Castonic warrior. And as far as the rolls go, I run power, crit power, and power on the rings. On the earrings, both are endurance and raise max HP. I run pumped etchings on basically everything. When I run with a priest, I swap to a crit necklace. Everything else stays the same. I have a pumped etching on that as well. When I run with a mystic, I run a power necklace. And I have, again, a pumped etching in both power rolls. My Shadowhunter brooch, I do have a keen etching. And this is just to raise my crit to a slightly bit higher, I just prefer it being with the keen, and I run a power and the crit factor roll on the brooch. I run the improved Mistel Circlet as Blade Waltz, Aerial Scythe, and Blade Frenzy tend to get used and do the most damage. Blade Waltz isn't the most damage, it's just used as much as Blade Draw almost. So, and since Aerial Scythe is the most used and hardest besides Blade Frenzy, I go to improved Mistel to increase the damage of my Aerial Scythe for the most part. The Energetic Mask, I use the Energetic Mask because more cooldown. I prefer cooldown, obviously. And you want to try to get, the highest rolls, 3 power. The best mask, personally, is 333 power. I just haven't got it, and the crit 5 is the best that I've gotten on this warrior. You probably won't have a bracelet, so you're going to be lacking 26 crit. This is where, if you're running anything below AHM, you still might be fine without the bracelet. If you're really worried, you can make this crit up by running, a crit crystal. You can choose to run Swifts or Power, and then you could run a crit inner. You can probably get a 20 crit inner, so 1 keen crystal and a crit inner makes up the bracelet. If you do have a bracelet, then you're pretty much set. You don't really need much more crit than this for a warrior. I do prefer Swift Versk. Power Versk are fine if you really want the extra power and don't feel you need the extra attack speed. And if you feel like you need the extra crit, you can run Keen. Warrior, I feel with the jewelry crystals is very flexible, and it really just depends what dungeon you're in. As I stated earlier, look at the skills, adjust your crit factor, what you need, and I like to do that with my crystals. Alright, rolls for actual armor. I highly suggest you run increased damage of Blade Draw. This is actually a must. Blade Draw is your most used, highest damaging skill. So, all the other rolls on your chest are really bad. Decreased damage by 6%, decreased damage from frontal, decreased damage from erased, and raised max HP are standard DPS rolls. Almost all DPS run that set. For your gloves, you want increased power, increased crit, increased attack speed. This is standard. For boots, endurance, movement speed, and mana, or MP, for those who are new, is standard. You can choose as you grow. You may want to swap out the MP for stun duration. Depends what dungeon you're in. I personally don't like that roll. I know plenty of people that like it, and it's not that big of a difference. I just like having mana. The Frax belt, I run power crit factor, and I have a pumped etching. I run a power inner. Again, if you're new, you may want to run a crit inner if you feel like you need that extra crit boost. As far as etchings on armor go, I run pumped. If you're new and you only can get grounded at the start, it's okay. Grounded's fine. Do know eventually when you're more comfortable, you should swap them to pump to get the extra damage. But again, for those who are new or first time learning warrior, it's not the worst thing to put a grounded on it, especially if you don't know if you like the class, instead of wasting pumped etching, since pump 4 to 5s can be kind of rare to get. They drop quite a bit, but you don't want to waste something on an alt if you're choosing this class to be an alt. If you're choosing it to be a main, then pumped etching, yeah, especially if it's at Kaya's or if you know you're going to be in Frax for a while. For the gloves, energetic. All the way energetic. I don't care what anyone says. I'm sorry. This is where I will put my foot down. Energetic. Warriors do need some cooldown. You can be one of those that run full attack stigmas, and I will forgo it. You can be someone who runs no cooldown on your weapon. I will not suggest it, but I would forgo it. If you're not running energetics on your glove and weapon, though, you are throwing. And I've seen warriors do that, and it's horrible. Within that, yes, I run decreased double cooldown. That is a preference. You could run Enrage on the top roll. It's not the worst thing. Again, this comes down more to playstyle. I prefer cooldown. I know some people prefer Enraged. And honestly, again, if a fight's dying within 20 to 24 seconds, Enrage is just going to kill it faster. But if you're going for the min-maxing, I suggest double cooldown, unless you can make it up somewhere else in like triple CD roll Stigmas, because I do truly think that 24/7 DG is more DPS output than not. Within that, I also run increased damage to Enrage, and I run increased damage when attacking from behind. The increased crit power by 0.3 is a preference. I've always preferred it. I've always felt that does more damage. I know a lot of people swear by 6%. The math I've always went by is if you're not slaying, you run crit power. And if you're slaying, which this warrior never will probably ever do, and new warriors should probably never do, because slaying's literally only really for speedrunning or for fun. 6% is more of a slaying roll I've been always gone by. But again, you could run 6%. It's not a bad roll. I've noticed the numbers are very close to the same. And again, for the etching, energetic all the way. So now that crystals. Yeah, we should go over those. You want to try and get poisoned leads down the road. That's the secondary effect. It reduces damage from enraged. But if you're starting out, you just want normal 65 level pounding, focus, bitter, savage. And you want hardy Niveates on your chest. At least one glistening when you get to Fraxum or Heroic Oath, and when you're in Kaya's. The glistening will help with your mana. These do not stack, so you only need one. And then for the rest of them, I think my main warrior, I run the secondary where it's increased damage to knock down bosses. But any hardy Nivea is great for someone who's starting, and you want to try to get at least one glistening. So that is the overall, stat setups I have on this warrior. I think the only thing, I do apologize if I didn't cover, when I run with a priest, I run a crit necklace. I'm gonna cycle back to that. I apologize if I skipped over that and you're like wondering. So before we get into a defined rotation, I do want to take a few minutes to explain the class. This is a class that I am deeply passionate about, and I do want to put out as much information. I know we are far on time in the video, but within that, let me take a few minutes to just explain the skills to warrior, because I feel like it's very important for people to understand what this class does and to understand how to utilize this class. And the first thing to know is that warriors have never been a burst damage. They are more sustained. And this is why I prefer cooldown, is that it is a sustained class. Within that, having DG being sustained and at 24 seconds is why I suggest to shoot for it, because that makes it a full sustain, the highest damage as a sustain. Within that though, I do want to go over how to sustain damage and what you should shoot for without stigmas. And the first thing to explain about warrior is you can see the 10 boxes above my HP bar. That is what's known as warrior's edge. That edge is what's going to tell you when you want to either scythe or aerial scythe. And to go over those, this is scythe and this is aerial scythe. Both those skills are your hardest hitting skills besides your ultimate. They're going to do what's the most amount of damage. Their damage scales on your edge. So if you scythe at 4 edge, it's not going to do anywhere near as much damage as if you scythe at 10 edge. The way you build edge is every skill you have generates a specific amount of edge. So warrior is all about math. It's all about counting, adding, and if you don't like that, then this is not the class for you. If you're into that, or if you want to learn that, well then, have fun enjoying the class. Within that though, Warrior's rotation is a priority. It's not a set rotation like Valk's where they, this button goes into this button, that goes into this button, that. It's not a set. This skill is a higher priority than this skill, or these set of skills is a higher priority than these set of skills. And the whole idea is you want to build edge as fast as you can to hit the hardest scythes or aerial scythes that you can. And I'm going to go over that. Before I go over that, I want to explain all the skills to an extent. That being that every skill you do will generate specific edge and what they do. So Blade Waltz is going to generate 1. Traverse Cuts, the skill will generate 2. Blade Draw outside of DG will generate 2. Rain of Blows will generate 2. Backstab Glyph will generate 2. Just that, it'll target you and put you behind the boss. DFA generates 1. Charging Slash generates 1. Pounce should also generate 1. Rising Fury 1. Reaping Slash 1. Poison Blade 2. Those are, for the most part, the skills you're going to use, and you're not even going to use most of them. But I do want to cover all of those skills because they all kind of have value at some point, or they may have value at some point. So, within that, what I want to go over is understanding edge stacking as well. And I apologize, I'm kind of jumping around a bit, but like I said, you want to get to 8 or 10 edge. And the reason I say 8 or 10 is because aerial scythe is a higher priority than scythe. Aerial scythe can also build 2 edge if you slow cast it. And this is what a slow cast aerial is. Up, it'll build 2. And when you see the spin and you smack down, you'll have 2 extra edge. So if you're at 8 edge, you can cast a slow cast aerial. If you're at 10, you could do a fast cast aerial where you don't see the spin and just go right through it, or you can scythe. But do know this. If aerial scythe is off cooldown, you should always aerial scythe. You should be scything every 4 seconds without stigmas. So pre-stigmas, the rule of thumb was scythe every 4 seconds. So aerial scythe has a longer cooldown. Scythe will shorten it every time you use it. So the idea is to build enough edge to aerial scythe and then scythe. And it should be a 1-for-1 ratio. Depending on cooldowns, it might be a 2-for-1. But that's the whole idea of when to scythe or aerial. Aerial takes priority. The next thing to know is Blade Draw. Blade Draw has a slow cast, which is this, and Blade Draw has a fast cast, which is that. So it's very important to know the difference, because if you're doing a slow cast Blade Draw, you are wasting time from building edge. Now I want to take a second and go over all the skills that fast cast Blade Draw, because there's a ton of them, and it's all situational, but at the end of the day, to start off, your highest priority is Blade Waltz Blade Draw, which is this right here. that is your highest priority as a warrior. That's what's going to give you the most amount of damage. I'll cover other concepts in case Blade Waltz is off cooldown or on cooldown. There are other skills you can utilize to fast cast Blade Draw. And there's some scenarios where you may use another skill to fast cast it instead of Blade Waltz. So, the skills that also fast cast it are Traverse Cuts, which is that one, Pounce, Charging Slash, Rising Fury, and Vortex Slash. Do you know Rising Fury has to be that second hit will fast cast it? If you don't do the second hit, it's not going to fast cast it. Rising Fury and Charging Slash nowadays are almost never used. You may use Charging Slash if you are far away from the boss and choose the Charging Slash into the boss, but it's very uncommon. Similar to Pounce. I know personally I like to pounce over bosses' waves, like AA. AAHM has a wave that you could pounce over and fast cast Blade Draw, but it's really uncommon and it's really kind of uncalled for. The main two skills that you're going to fast cast Blade Draw with is Blade Waltz or Traverse Cuts. Again, if those are really off cooldown, then your next choices are Rising Fury and Charging Slash into Blade Draw. But it's very rare to find a time where Blade Waltz is on cooldown and Blade Draw is not. Now, if Blade Draw is on cooldown, if it's, you're waiting for the timer, you have a fill rotation where, depending on what edge you're at, if you're at 6 edge and Aerial Scythe is up, you can either Poison Blade or Rain of Blows to get you your last 2. If Aerial Scythe is down and you're at 6, you're basically going to use Rain of Blows and Poison Blade to get you your last 10 edge to do a Scythe. Again, those are kind of your 2 filler skills, and it depends where you're at in your edge counting to know if you should use those. Now, the last thing to know about skills is Deadly Gamble really increases the amount of cooldown applied to your skills. And you'll see when I hit the crab that DG shortens everything by a crazy amount of time. While you're in DG, that's when you're going to use your Ultimate Blade Frenzy to really bring its cooldown crazy low. Normally, if you use it outside of DG, it's going to have like an over 2-minute cooldown if you're brand new. You want to use that inside of DG. As well as DG will also increase the amount of edge to Blade Draw. So this is also very important to know, is that inside of DG, your rotation after the short startup is literally gonna look most likely Blade Waltz, Blade Draw, Blade Waltz, Blade Draw into a specific Scythe. Whether if Aerial or Scythe is up, you're gonna use one of them. Again, Aerial's higher priority. Scythe is second priority. So, within that, that's a lot of stuff to take in. I know this is a lot. The last things I want to go over before we actually talk about a baseline rotation is just a little bit more about skills. And that you do have 3 stuns as a warrior, being Reaping Slash, your Backstab, and your Battle Cry / Shout is a stun. It's very important to know these. Battle Cry is the last stun you'll ever want to use, but for a dungeon like Bahar, if you have to do all 3, now you know you have 3 stuns. Your iframes are DFA and Evasive Roll. It's very important to know this in case you have to iframe a mechanic. Those are the 2 skills you want to use. DFA will generate you edge, as well as DFA is much longer. If you want to cancel DFA, you can do so with Blade Waltz. You can also cancel Evasive Roll with Blade Waltz, and this gets important to where we'll talk in a little bit about Blade Frenzy canceling, Scythe canceling, and all that good stuff in a few minutes. So, the last thing is skills that give damage reduction. And this is also important in case you can't iframe a mech, or maybe you want to damage reduction something that's happening. What you can use is Torrent of Blows, Rain of Blows, Pounce, and Aerial Scythe all will give you damage reduction along with your Shadow. And I'm not going to cast the Shadow because it's just going to go mess with the crab and I don't want that mess. So those are skills that you can cast to damage reduction certain hits of a boss. Within that, now that I've rambled, I'll finally hit the crab and I'll give you guys a decent rotation to start off with on Warrior. So, the first thing is you're not going to shout the boss. I'm doing that so the crab doesn't turn on me. The first thing you want to do as the tank's going in is you can backstab and blade waltz into traverse cuts. And you want to let traverse cuts go all the way up to 13 stacks. This being that you'll get the most amount of attack speed from traverse cuts. Throughout the fight, you will want to refresh traverse cuts. You don't have to let it hit 13 ticks. You can just let it hit 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. Do know that letting it hit 10 will increase the damage of blade roll. It's an argument whether if you want to take that risk of having and hoping that that next blade roll does crit with that amount of damage, or if you just want to do it as quick as possible to refresh and get the fast cast blade roll. After you cast that blade roll, you could cast Brooch into Deadly Gamble, allowing you to do an Aerial Scythe into Blade Frenzy if you're at 8 edge. If you're not at 8 edge, you should be able to just Blade Waltz Blade Roll, and then you go into your standard Building Edge, Blade Waltz, Blade Waltz, Blade Roll, Scythe or Aerial Scythe, depending what's up. If Blade Roll goes on cooldown, your next choices are again Poison Blade or Rain of Blows. So, I will show you that here now. Get the 13, Blade Waltz, and there we go. Should have cast Birch a little earlier, but now we're at the Blade Waltz, Blade Roll, Scythe Spam, Blade Waltz, Blade Roll, Blade Waltz, Aerial, Blade Waltz. Blade Waltz went on cooldown, so I need 10, so I had to use Rain of Blows and Poison Blade. Within this, you just keep going until DG runs out. Now that DG ran out, the idea here is to build 10 edge as quick as you can. So, we could do Blade Waltz, Blade Roll, Blade Waltz, Blade Roll, Blade Waltz, Blade Roll, and you could Scythe at 9 if you want. But this is the idea. You've noticed I let my Traverse Cuts stack fall off. That's because I should have Blade Waltz Traverse Cuts into Blade Roll to keep it up. Blade Roll's down, so I could Blade Waltz into Rain of Blows. I could then Blade Waltz back into Blade Roll and now Scythe. Again, you'll want to do a lot of this much faster, all while keeping that up. Now, the last things that I didn't go over is Scythe canceling, as well as Blade Frenzy canceling. We do this with Evasive Roll. So, if I just cast Scythe, you can see that there's an animation lock to it. The way to cancel that animation is hitting Evasive Roll. It's much faster. But if you do it too quick, you won't see damage. You'll need to practice this, because it does take some time to see the damage numbers and cancel out. So when you're in DG, that allows you to have faster time of getting to the 4-second scythes. So DG cast this to bring it up. Scythe. Oh, I went to the front. You want to go to the back, but if you keep practicing this, you'll see the numbers and get used to your blade roll or your your scythe cancels. I apologize. Tongue twist. The other thing is canceling out of Blade Frenzy is very similar. So I'm going to build up to 8 edge, go aerial into Blade Frenzy, and you want to cancel that as well so you don't get animation locked. All of that's done with Evasive Roll, and then you can cancel the end of Evasive Roll with Blade Waltz. allowing you to, yet again, continue the rotation of Blade Wilts Blade Drill, Aerial, Blade Wilts Blade Drill. Gotta build other edge to get my 10. And I should have done that faster, but, you know. It's been a while since I've had to use all the fills. So, that's your DG rotation. Outside of DG, you're gonna have to get a little creative, depending on whether if Blade Roll goes on cooldown. Again, to show off, you can Rising Fury into Blade Roll. Of course, I went on cooldown. Hills would be Poison Blade in this. You can Charging Slash into Blade Roll, and you can Pounce into Blade Roll. And then, of course, Scythe and cancel it. So, that is the overall basics of Warrior. Again, you should never Poison Blade, you should never Rain of Blows if you have Blade Roll available. And if you have Blade Wilts and Blade Roll available, you should never be doing Rising Fury, Charging Slash, or Pounce into Blade Roll. It should always be Blade Wilts Blade Roll first. Aerial Scythe over Scythe, canceling your Scythes with Evasive Roll and going into Blade Wilts. You can also Poison Blade back in, but that is a much older strat. It's very unusual to use that, but it's another strat back when Warrior used to give damage on Poison Blade. Now we don't use it as much. And yeah, that's the overall rotation for Warrior. Again, it's a priority rotation, and it just depends what you want to do. Alright, and so now that we swapped to Mfba, I did promise at the end of the video I would show off Mfba's rotation, and this is something you can strive for if you decide to do this playstyle. This build is much more advanced. This is what you can do with, you know, crazy CDR Stigmas. I'm not going to kill the crab, I'm not going to go through the whole time, but as you'll see, the rotation changes quite significantly when you have a ridiculous amount of cooldown. So you can see where all those suggested glyphs and other things start to change depending on your cooldown. But the startup and the concepts are still the same. That we want to backstab as our tank's going in. We want to Blade Wilts and get our 13 stacks of Traverse Cuts. We can then Blade Draw, can cast our Broach DG, go into our Aerial Scythe, our Blade Frenzy, cancel, and do our Blade Wilts Blade Draw spam. But you're gonna notice, with the amount of cooldown I have on Mfba, I don't have to do anything else but Blade Wilts, Blade Draw, Aerial spam. Again, I'm not expecting anyone new to do this. I'm just showing what the difference is. So, here we go. And as you can see, we develop our Blade Wilts, Blade Draw spam. And since our Aerial Scythe is at 3 seconds, we really don't have to do anything else. Maybe add an extra Blade Draw in. I could do Scythe, but realistically, the timing just kind of doesn't work out. But this is the difference when you have a ton of Stigmas with a ton of cooldown. And I should have kept Traverse Cuts up, but I just was being lazy. Shame on me. But yeah, I'm gonna stop there. That's the difference of Stigmas with cooldown and Stigmas without cooldown, and the difference of how the class plays. You can even see here alone, the rotation feels a lot smoother, and just other skills feel smoother with this amount of cooldown if you really had to. So that is my overall basic, intermediate, a ton of information to throw at your face warrior DPS guide. If anyone wants me to do something different, if you're like, man, you gave me way too much information, can you dummy it down for me? I can, just let me know. If I can figure it out, I'll actually try to put a marker in where I start explaining and showing the rotation, if that helps anyone. I haven't done that on YouTube yet, but it's something I've been looking to learn, and this might be the time to start. Within that, that's about all. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you have any questions, I might have missed a few things, and if I did, I truly apologize. I know this video is probably about an hour long, and you know, it's a lot of information to take in. So if you guys feel like it's too long and you want something shorter, let me know and I'll do my best. But I really wanted to cover as much information about this class for anyone who really wants to know. Like I said, that's about it. Thank you all for hitting our 250 goal. I'm super excited to see us hit more, and for all the more content that I'll be bringing out on all platforms of Tera. That's about all. I hope to see you all in Aboria, gamers.